And we're back, and it's COMP1050 Animation 2D Tools, Week 7, Part 5, final part for this week. This is called Space Rocks, which is very similar to Asteroids, like in the classic game, except there's some changes we're going to talk about. Here is 66 slides of PowerPoint stuff that we're not going to get through all of them today, but I'm going to talk about the major points. And we're going to skip by some of the other parts so you can read for yourself. But the entire game is detailed here in this document. Okay, let's talk about it a little bit. So, classic video game, 1979, Atari came out with Asteroids. And it was so addictive because it was such a simple game. You had your ship in the middle of the screen, some simple sound effects, and then you would have vector graphics, really simple vector graphics, and you would beat up these space rocks that would break off into smaller chunks until they were gone, and then you would have every level you would have more rocks or faster moving rocks, and maybe perhaps an alien ship that would try and kill you as well. Okay, so a couple things we try to do something very similar to that, except we're going to have a few objects, if you will. We're going to have our spaceship, rocks, and missiles, and we're also going to have a shield, which is kind of cool. Let's talk about the design of the game. So here's the design. We haven't talked really about this, but when we get into your major game, like for the end result, remember I talked about making a sketch and everything else? Even for your current game, your Project 1 that's due at week 8, I expect you to have kind of like, almost like a sketch like this, where you have a little bit of here are my objects that I'm going to have in my game. I'm going to have my ship. Here's my ship with a thruster. Here's what my shield looks like. Here's my missile. Here are my icons. Here's what my space rocks look like. These are all the objects, the media, as part of my game. Let's talk about design elements. So my ship, we break down a big task like this. This is a big game, right? If you think about it, there's a lot of little pieces to this game, right? And it's going to be the same for your game. So here's some stuff that you got to maybe think about for yourself when you do some game design on your own, right? We've talked about this in other classes, right? But let's talk about it again. So your ship capabilities, what are they? Well, it appears stationary in the middle of the screen to start. So that's the first thing you got to think about. These are all things that, almost from a storyboarding perspective, how your game starts. Okay, the ship, it can turn left when the left arrow is pressed and right when the right arrow is pressed. It's pretty simple. We've got to put it down, because these are capabilities for the ship itself. Okay, the ship accelerates forward when the up arrow is pressed to infinity. If you keep pressing this thing over and over again, it'll like whiz by. You got to see it. Let's check it out. So here I'm going to bring up space rocks in my code archive. Here's space rocks right here. Again, from our lovely people at Game University. And I start the game. If I press the Z button, I have shields, right? So I start the game. I start in the middle of my ship starts kind of in the middle of the screen. I can rotate. It's going to die in a second. I got to press the screen itself to start. So I'm rotating right and left, right? If I start increasing my speed, it'll increase forever. Like if there's like space to move, let's try that again. It'll like rotate forever. Here we go. There's nothing there. Watch. It's gone. It's gone, baby. Right? It'll go forever. And same thing, it won't go back. There is only a forward thrust. So there's no backward thrust in this one. All right, so here we go. Okay. If I press the Z button anytime, I have 3 shields per life. So here I go. I'm going forward. Right? Press my shield on. And I can also fire my weapons, my bullets, until I die, right? Dying actually has an interesting pattern, right? If I blow up, I have a little explosion graphic that happens very quickly, right? So that's something else I got to kind of include, right? So here's my ship, right? Now there's a few glitches, as you can see, because I'm able to fire even after I'm dead, right? So that's not a good thing. That's something that would need to be corrected. So here I am, bang, 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 I'm killing everything. And I died again, right? I'm not really playing this really intelligently. I'm just going along. A couple of other things you should notice is for the game itself is that the game has multiple sizes of rocks, right? It's actually really cool what they've done. They've got the rock itself, they rotate. If you notice, the rocks rotate, as well as, yeah, they're paging me, as well as they have different sizes. This thing is going to kill me now if I don't kill it. There we go. And when I'm done, a bunch of new rocks start with another level, if you notice, and they're a little bit faster than they were before, right? Now I have unlimited ammo, right? So it's not like an ammo problem, right? If I stay in the middle of the screen, if I physically don't move, I probably have one of the best chances to win, right? If a rock is coming at me, I could use a shield if I have one. Yeah, I got a bit of an error. So definitely there's some glitches that need to be fixed on this particular game, but the game has a lot of little moving parts to it, and I encourage you to take a look at the code from a learning process perspective because there's lots of stuff to talk about. But let's go back to planning for a second. So again, it accelerates forward up when the up arrow is pressed. It moves accordingly to its velocity. The faster it moves, the more thrust I put to it, the faster it goes, and it'll keep going forever. It won't stop, right? It'll keep accelerating to infinity. Also, probably die very quickly too. It'll generate a shield when the Z button is pressed, Z key, right? How about our missiles? Our missile can be fired from the ship. That's the first thing. It's created when the player presses the space bar. The velocity and position determined by location and rotation of the ship. So we're using that special formula, that cosine and sine function to determine our x and y coordinates of where the bullet's going to go after it's been fired, right? It's going to move again according to its velocity, and it's pretty quick, right? Rock capabilities, okay? We have a random number starting velocity and rotation speed, right? So a random starting velocity. So the speed and the angle that they're flying in, they're all random, right? It moves according to its velocity. It rotates according to a rotation speed. So it rotates means, remember, rotating is rotating around itself. So it actually physically rotates like a rock moving. It makes it look more realistic as it rotates. And they have 3 different sizes: a big rock, a medium rock, and a small rock. These are all symbols that are a part of your asset library, if you will. Okay. Collisions. That's what this game's all about, right? There's 2 types: missile and rock. That's one type of collision, right? When a missile and a rock collide, the original rock is removed. So we have to talk about this remove child idea, remove the rock, right? If it was a big rock, 2 medium rocks appear at the same location. So it splits the rock in 2, okay? If it was a medium rock, 2 smaller rocks appear at the same location. That's kind of cool. Small rocks just disappear, no rocks replace them, and the missile in a collision will also be removed. So these are all things that we have to think about when we're building our game. This is almost like a game sketch, if you will. Talk about what happens when certain things happen, almost like your storyboard, right? Rock and with ship. So rock and ship collide. When a rock and the ship collide, the rock behaves like a missile hit, right? So it gets removed, and the ship is also removed. So if you get hit by the ship, the rock splits, does everything as normal, but then you're dead. So it doesn't really matter, right? And of course, it's all about the player's experience, challenge, and fun. So a player has 3 lives, right? If this isn't the last life for the player, he gets another ship, which appears in the center of the screen after 2 seconds. Okay? From a challenge level perspective, if the player shoots all the rocks and there are none left on the screen, the level is over, and after a short delay, a new wave of rocks appears, but a little faster than the last set. So the rocks actually start moving faster. That's the complexity. We talked about this actually from a game design perspective. It becomes really tedious when things get faster and faster in a game, because now you're just playing to a point where you can't play anymore. If you're really good at space rocks, this game, you're going to get to the point where you can't win anymore because it's just too fast. Because when your game starts to accelerate, it's a bad thing. It should be more challenging, not just faster. All right. playing your player's shield. Another action the player can take is generate a shield by pressing the Z key, right? And it goes around the ship for 3 seconds, so it kind of makes him so he can live longer, right? So really, try not to use a strategy. Don't use your Z key. Don't use your shield at all unless you know you're in for certain death, right? For sure. Certain death is the only time you use your shield, number one. You don't charge into rocks. That's a bad thing, like I was doing, all right? And the other thing is try not to use your shield at all. So if you pass the level without using your shield at all, then you can use your shield at higher levels when the rocks are moving like crazy speeds, right? Maybe even survive longer and get higher points. Okay, screen wrap. Here's one we haven't talked about yet in ActionScript, right? When a ship moves at the edge of the screen or a rock, right? They wrap whichever direction they've gone into, they wrap to the other side. However, if a missile leaves the screen, right, you can't fire a missile so it wraps to the other side, right? It won't allow that to happen. The missiles just disappear. So here we've talked about, in very short order, some basic rules of the game, of how the game operates. Okay, here's some graphics, right? The ship is the most complex element of the game, right? It needs a plane state. So here's your plane state, right? Actually, this state has actually got a shield around it too. And then when the thrusters turned on, here's when the thrusters turned on right here, right? And then the rest of the frames are a little short explosion. So what do? The artist has actually taken the ship and split it in pieces, right? So it looks like the ship is blown up. But actually what they've done is just taken the pieces, cut it up, and moved it into different positions farther and farther apart to make it look like a blow-up, right? So just another frame, huh?
Like just
knifed it through, like sliced it up, right, and basically moved it away with Flash. They probably used Flash to do all that, by the way, right? So very simple splitting up. The rocks. So there's 3 different sizes of rocks: small, medium, and big, right? As an example, and they also rotate. They don't just move. And they have 3 different frames for each one of them. Let's take a look. So if I go back to the game and I go to my library, here's my small rock. If I go to small rock, in my timeline, I have 3 different sets of rocks. I'm just going to go up a little bit. Let's go to 800%. So here's my small rock. Well, guess what? There's this rock and there's this rock. So actually 3 different small rocks. So they've actually given variations to all the rock. So it has 3 different types to make the game more interesting, right? So each frame of all the rocks, let's go for medium rocks. Here's our medium rock. So 3 different rocks here, right? And same thing with large rocks. Big rocks won't fit into the screen. Here we go, right? And they're all different as well, right? So 3 different rocks, and each size has 3 different types of small, 3 different types of medium, and so on, making the game a more interesting game. Okay, so a few assets we're talking about here. Oops, that's not what I wanted. I wanted to go here. So that's one thing. There's also a couple of icons, right? Some status icons. So first of all, the missile is a small yellow dot, right? And if you notice, the registration point is right in the middle of the missile, right? So just from a movement perspective. We also have a couple of other objects. There's a couple of icons that we used to kind of show the player from a feedback perspective how many ships he has left and how many shields he has left per ship. Kind of interesting, right? Now we just have to create the action scripts. We have all the elements of the game, and this is what I expect you guys to do. Think about all the different things you want your interface to look like, right? Sketch it out. What would your optimal interface look like? What do you want to not include in your game? What do you want to include in your game? And then create your graphics for the game itself. And then start setting up the class. Now this class is one of the biggest classes we've dealt with, and we're going to talk a little bit about it again when we come back. But I want to show you the amount of files it has. Okay, so here's our Space Rocks class. It has the actual Space Rocks AS file itself. Here it is, right? And it's a huge class. Like if I look at Space Rocks, it's one big class, okay? Each one of these items, though, if you notice, like the ship itself, Here's the ship. If I go to edit class, right, it's just a stub. There isn't anything special about this ship. It's just an object, right? The major stuff is done in the document class, right? So if I go to the document class, in this particular case, all the work is done in this document class. There's tons of variables that I would get you to look at. You know, some of them they're related to the ship. Some of them are related to the shields, the score, and the level. All the variables are here before the constructor, right? Which actually there is no constructor again. We have the start space rocks method that we're using because again we're using this encapsulation method. Let's go back to our main stage. Remember we have these 3 frames. We have frame 1, frame 2 is the actual game frame, and frame 3 is the game over state. These are the 3 states. Well, in the middle state, if I go to it's the same format, right? I got the first state, which is a little button that says play the game. The second state, which actually calls the Space Rocks game, and the third state, which actually calls the play state, right? So again, we don't have a constructor anymore for the encapsulated game class because if we were to have something like that, it would only work if it's fired from the first frame. Now we're not doing an empty symbol here, an empty movie symbol like we did before. We're just not including a constructor for the main game class. Okay, so this is where it's firing from. So you have a lot of elements in here, and this is what I'm saying. Analyze this class itself, right, for the actual game itself. There's a lot of elements in here. And I truly invite you, I'm giving this to you because I know you're going to need some of this stuff for your own game. Even though it's not a space game you're creating, right, it doesn't matter. There's a lot of cool elements in here that you can use, like shields, health for your player, score, all kinds of stuff that it does to keep track of things, right? And also, what happens when you go to the next level, right? So this is why I'm including it for you before we get back from break, okay? And so again, I would. This is kind of homework for you. Take a look at it, Space Rocks, and all the details. There are 66 slides of details for this particular one, detailing every aspect of the game that we know of right now. The only thing that's missing from this game, again, it would be sounds, like shooting sounds and a soundtrack. One thing is, we're going to be creating these sounds for our game, and a really cool tool that I recommend to you that you can download for Mac, and there's actually a port. Actually, it was originally in Windows. This is a Mac port, and I downloaded it for you guys to see. It's called CFXR. It's right here. Let me take a look at it. So here's our little sound effect generator, right? And what it does is it creates little retro sound effects. You can download this thing. It's a free download. If you look up CFXR, and there's one for Windows as well. So example, if I have a pickup coin effect, you can actually have random pickup coin sound effects. Example, right? If I like that one. If I don't like that, I can press it again, and it'll give me another one, right? Or another one, right? So a bunch of big pickup coins effects. Same thing for laser and shoot, right? So some of them might be better than others, right? Explosions, right? So you can choose the sound effects. You can and in fact you can create them. So if I'm an explosion effect, I can go with a sawtooth, right? Change the effect and continue play it looping, right? So there's the sound effect, right? So I can keep going. I can keep playing this thing, right? And I can increase the frequency. Right, kind of an explosion with a sound effect, noise. Point is, you can make all these sounds. They're all downloadable, and they're all made-up sounds that you can use for your own retro kind of arcade games. Same thing with hit, a jump, a blip, and some kind of random effect. Right. So take a look at this, kind of the free tool. Available for you to create your own sound effects. You can export your sound effect right here with the export button, and it'll create the file that's compatible. You can also decide whether you want to use it at 44 kilohertz or 22 kilohertz for really if you want to save your memory.